What happens when you invite the king to lunch and the king doesn't show up? President Obama is about to find out. What also happens when a Pulitzer Prize-winning author says that the president is lying about how Osama bin Laden was killed? And here's a question that everybody needs to ask themselves. Would you want your son, your daughter, your husband, your wife, a member of your family to become a cop in today's society? I'm Ed Berliner. Buckle up. Let's get to work. This is The Hard Line for May 11th, 2015.
At this time, we can confirm we've had 2 fatalities as a result of this storm that has affected the city of Van and Van Zandt County.
Van is a strong city, strong community. We will rebuild.
You don't know what's going through somebody's head. I don't know. I hate it. I feel bad for the family, but you got to realize they still my two. It's still my two. Oh, Lord Jesus. I'm sorry for that family.
If I could say or face the people who did this to my son, I would let them know you took something very valuable away from me. But in that, I will still forgive you because you took my baby. I will still forgive you.
We learned of the king's possible change of plans from the Saudis on Friday night, I think after that schedule had already gone out. This was confirmed by the Saudis on Saturday, given what's going on in Yemen, the imminent start of a ceasefire, hopefully, if the Houthis agree to it there. The king made this decision, as the Saudis have spoken to.
Our allies in the Arab region were supposed to come and visit with the president at Camp David, talk about a possible peace process, if you will. Well, the King of Saudi Arabia has decided that he is not going to show up. Is it a slam, or is it just something that no one should be that concerned about? We've got a lot to talk about. Let's welcome in the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy. He is now founder and president of the Center for Security Policy. Welcome Frank Gaffney to the Hardline. Frank, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Ed. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Let's get right to it, because the Saudi Arabian king, and there's all kinds of excuses out here, but he says he will not attend the meetings in the United States. Some are calling this, overseas as well, are calling it a real snub. And a lot of people are saying that basically the Saudis are sending a president a message that you are more concerned about Iran than you are concerned about us. What do you see the reality being?
Well, I think there's no question. This is a repercussion that is directly flowing from really what amounts to the president changing sides in this area as he has in so many others, whereas the United States government under both Democratic and Republican presidencies for years has recognized the government of Iran, this Islamic Republic, jihadist enterprise, as a threat, a terrorist sponsoring state, and has sought to isolate it, has sought to keep it from getting nuclear weapons, and has worked to varying degrees closely with the Saudis, other Gulf Cooperation Council members, of course, the Israelis. What we're witnessing under President Obama is a complete reversal of all of that. He is trying to sidle up to the Iranians and isolate or alienate the rest.
Let me get that to you, though. A great point here. Why would we want to isolate the Saudis when they have been friends for so long, they are so powerful in that region, and instead sidle up to Iran? It doesn't make sense.
Well, there are compelling reasons for having a much more realistic policy towards the Saudis than we have had. They have been playing a double game with us for many years. But what he's doing in this particular context is really throwing them under the bus at the same time that he is enabling and, I believe, clearing the way for their sworn enemies, the Iranians, to acquire the very nuclear weapons that he has promised they would not get. So in this circumstance, we're not remonstrating with, we're not engaging in sort of behavior modification with the Saudis. We're creating conditions that I believe will translate into a vastly more serious and probably uncontainable regional conflict.
Can we trust the Saudis? That has always been a great question, Frank.
No, we can't. We can trust them to do certain things to advance their jihadist program. They are, after all, embracing this Sharia doctrine, which says it's their obligation under, Allah's will. But having said that, I think there are places that we can work with them as long as we're clear-eyed about it and we're not allowing this sort of double game to persist. My concern is that we're getting the worst of both worlds. We're essentially enabling a government that is not just hostile to the Saudis, not just hostile to other Sunni nations in the region, certainly hostile to Israel, but also profoundly hostile to us, threatening of us every day. I mean, death to America is their watchword. But we are also doing it in a manner that is calculated, not, I think, just an incidental and unintended effect, but calculated to alienate some of these nations that we clearly need at a moment that we're going to face much more serious problems in the region.
It almost sounds like sometimes we're trying to do business with the good jihadis, if you will, and that was said very tongue-in-cheek, believe me. A few minutes that we have left. Please, yeah, I know it's not a good thing to say, but it's like when you even point out that the Saudis are involved, that you use the word jihadis there as well. People need to understand that we are not able to trust them 100% either. Frank, something else that we must talk about here with the few minutes we have left. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Seymour Hersh claims that the U.S. version of the bin Laden raid is absolutely filled with lies. He has come back. He has backed himself up time and time again. Former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morell said this story is all wrong, and there is only one anonymous source that Hersh is using to get this point across. Who do we trust, Frank?
Well, I wouldn't trust Seymour Hersh as far as I can throw him. That's for sure. This guy has made stories up. He has been nonetheless lauded with the Pulitzer Prize, no less, on some occasions by others in the journalistic trade. But he does, I believe, fabricate. And no journalist worth his salt gives you one unidentified source as the gospel truth. I personally must tell you, I think there are some things about what happened in connection with this raid that probably have not yet come to light. My guess, for example, is that the president wasn't involved in the decision to actually take down bin Laden, that this was something that was engineered by his subordinates, and he was more or less presented with it as a fait accompli. But some of the stuff that Hersh is claiming on the basis of this one unidentified source, I don't think rings true. And unless he can document it better than he has to date, I don't think we should treat it as
Frank,
true.
is he just screaming for attention at this point? It sounds like a guy who's looking to sell books and get his name back out there.
Heavens knows he's done it before, and it wouldn't surprise me if that was a consideration for him right now, too, Ed.
And we should point out again that even the White House has come forward and said, no, but by the way, before we leave this, though, do you think we should still be asking questions, though, about, because in Hersh's book or his articles, they're talking about the fact that maybe bin Laden wasn't dropped off the side of the boat. Maybe he was buried. So do we really need to keep asking these questions? How important is it? Or do we need to let this sleeping killer lie once and for all?
Well, again, I think there are other questions that I would put, like, why was he given a full Islamic burial with honor, assuming indeed he was dropped off the side of the boat, and I think he was. That doesn't make any sense to me. We should not have in any way dignified this jihadist, this terrorist, this murderer. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that we did.
I only got about 30 seconds left. Jeb Bush says he would have backed the Iraq invasion. Do you think that in light of what is going on now, in light of his brother and the way people look back at him, that that was a smart thing to say?
I don't know. I backed the Iraq invasion. I didn't like the way it was conducted afterwards, but I thought it was the right thing to do to stop Saddam Hussein, and I suppose he's being loyal to his brother in saying the same.
And I guess maybe what he needs to point out is that he would have backed the invasion, but the right thing to do, though, is to point out that, well, we would have done things differently, which, of course, is the right political thing to say at this point. Even you're pointing that out. Everybody who's seen it says that's the right thing to say.
It's not just political. It's the truth, I think.
It is indeed the truth in so many ways. Well, Jeb is going to have to talk about that as well as he moves ahead on the campaign trail. Frank, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show and bring a little clarity to all this. And believe me, Seymour Hersh has got a lot of people that he needs to make believe him at this point, other than just you and me, especially with his past. Frank, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ed.
All right, my pleasure. Seymour Hersh says he is right. Morell says he is wrong. The White House says he is wrong. Hersh has got a lot behind him to make people think that he is making this one up. Stay with us. This is the fastest 60 minutes in news. The Hard Line continues.